Hey, and welcome to this video on the Tableau Certified Data Analyst exam. We're going to be looking today at logical and Boolean expressions. So what we're going to cover specifically is the functions that return either true or false, functions like and, not, or, is null, and in. And then we'll be looking at conditional functions, so if, then, else, and also case and IIF. Finally, we'll look at a couple functions that specifically deal with handling null values. And so pro tip, if I'm going too slowly or too quickly, please adjust this video speed as needed. Now I just want to point out the documentation for this topic. I'll be posting a link to the documentation with the video. I'm now going to switch into the demo and start to teach these specific formulas and functions, right? These specific things. So let's start off looking at logical functions that return true or false. So if I create a calculated field, and I'm going to call this and test, right? So with and, if I do true and false, this will return false because both values have to be true in order for the overall result to be true. So if I have a true and false is true. Are they both true? No, they're not, so it's false. Whereas if I say true and true, then this will return true. If both values connected by the and are true, then the whole thing is true. So for example, if I say, I'm going to say product name contains Xerox, let's say, and customer, or let's say segment, equals home office, then this is saying both the product name must contain the word Xerox and the segment must be home office. And so if I add the segment here, you see that even when the segment is home office, this sometimes returns false. It will only return true when the product name contains the word Xerox. So if I go down here, if I just go down to find the true values, somewhere way down here. See, the segment says home office and the product name contains the word Xerox, then I get true. When either of those is false, the whole thing will return false because both product name must be Xerox and segment must be home office. So that is and. With or, I'm going to do an or test. So or means either must be true. So it's true or false. So if one of these, if this or that is evaluated to true, then the whole thing is true. And so if I remove this stuff that I just added here, this returns true because one of the two values is true. Let's use a more interesting example where I'm not just coding in the Boolean values, I'm actually putting some kind of expression here. So I'll do when segment equals home office, actually it needs to be uppercase, home office, or let's see, category equals, what are the categories? Don't quite remember, so I'm just going to add them in. Category equals furniture. So this will give me a true when either the segment is home office or the category is furniture, or both. And so now, where's my new, this is my or test now. Nope. I need to find this is my or. And I have the category and I also need the segment. And so this returns true when either the segment is home office, so whenever this is the case, we get a true, or the category is furniture. And so we see that when the category is furniture, we get true, and also when the segment is home office, we get true. If neither of those is true, then we get false. So when the category is office or technology, and when the segment is either consumer or corporate, we get false. So that's the or. Now let's take a look at is null. I don't think I actually have a null value in this data right now, so I'm just going to use the word null in my calculation. And so this is null test will return is null 1. This will return false because the value 1 is not null. If I bring this in, we will see it as false. But then if I change this to the word null, if I type null like this, that is going to give me true. Now, if I put it in quotes, it would be false because the string that just says null in quotes is actually not the null value. It's a string that says null. It needs to be the null value, not just a string that happens to say null. So this is false. Just switch it back. This will give me. So this one returns true whenever the value is null. Finally, let's take a look at in. And so in will return true when the values are in the specified expression. So in test. So let's see, we'll do segment in, let's do corporate, comma, home office. So this will give me true whenever the segment is in either corporate or home office. And so we see it's true when the segment's corporate, and then it's true when the segment's home office. That is it for the logical functions that I want to cover. Now I'm going to take a look at the conditional functions, which often use logical functions. And so that's why I want to cover them second. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a calculated field using the if, then, else. If test. Maybe I should put spaces. So I'll do if segment equals consumer, and consumer segment. So if the segment is consumer, then I'm going to return the value consumer segment. Else if let's say category equals furniture, then furniture category. And then I'll do else something else. And now I want to add the category to my view. And I'm going to add this new calculation. And let's just open it up again so that we can see what we're doing here. And so what this tells me is if the segment is consumer, then regardless of what happens later, regardless of whether any of these conditions are true, I'm going to return the value customer segment. And so we get all these with the words customer segment. The next thing we do is if this wasn't true, then I'm going to look at the category. And if category is furniture, then I'm going to return the words furniture category. And so that's what we get here as well as here. And then finally, if neither of these conditions are true, then I'm going to return the word something else. And now we can put as many else if conditions as we want. So I could add another one. I could add when category equals office supplies. And I could say office category. So I could do that. Or I could remove this and not have any else if category. But the syntax stays the same. It needs to be that there's a logical expression and then the word then, and then another expression that gives me the value. So I could do a calculation here. I could do some other complicated expression. But in this case, I'm just using a string literal to return a certain string, right? So I'm just saying then give me consumer segment, then give me furniture category, and so on. So I could get rid of all these. And then if I got rid of these, it would just give me, if this isn't true, I would just get a null value. And so now we just get nothing because we didn't handle that case, so it just gives us a null value, nothing. So that's the if, then, else, if condition. And that, by the way, it has to end with the word and. So that tells us we're done. And END says that we're done. If I don't have that, I'm going to get a syntax error. So it needs to be that at the end we have that word END. So we don't need an else clause, but we do need to end with this keyword END. So that's that one. And now I want to take a look at case. So I'm going to do case test. So this is handy when you want to look at a single field and do different things based on the value of that field. So if I do case, and now I'm going to do category, when, I'll say furniture, then things you, big stuff, I'll call it. When office supplies, then reusable stuff. When technology, then I'll say geek stuff. End. And so this has a similar syntax to if in that it ends with the word end, right? We've got to have a case, then we have the word when, and then we have the word then. These are all necessary. And so this says when furniture, then you do big stuff. Then when office supplies, do reusable stuff. So I'm just going to add this in and replace the if then else test with this value. And so you see that this case statement is working to say that we look at the category and we give it a value based on what we've put into the case expression here. And if there's a condition that's not handled, again, it will just give us a null value. So if I delete this, I just get a null for technology. So that's the case. The last thing I want to look at is IIF, which is really just a shorthand. So the test is the first condition is something that's going to be true or false. So for example, category equals furniture. And then the next thing is what you will return if that's true. So we'll say it is furniture. And then the last thing is what you will do if it returns false. And so that's going to be not furniture. And then we do have this last parameter. Since it's in brackets, that means it's optional. And actually, I'm not remembering what that one is for. The third value is if, I guess, the expression doesn't evaluate to a value. So if it returns a null, then it'll go to this last value. But that's optional, so I'm just going to close this out. And so this is going to be my IF test. Put this in. And so this says it is furniture when the value is furniture, otherwise it says not furniture. So that's kind of just a shorthand. You could just use an if expression, but it's a little quicker. So that's the conditionals. Now let's take a look at the nulls. We have two. We have if null and zn. So if null, if null takes a value and my val, and if that value happens to be null, it will return expression 2. So it takes this my val, and if my val is not null, it'll return that. But if it is null, then I'll return what I will return if it is null, right? It'll return the second expression. And so this is handy for basically saying I want to transform my null values into some other value, but otherwise, if they're not null, I want to keep what I have to begin with. And so that's this one, if null. And so we can see that it returns my value because my value, the first expression, is not null. But of course, if I change it to the word null, to the expression null here, then it will return the second value because the first value is null. It's similar to coalesce in SQL, if you're familiar with that. So that's if null, and then Zn is even simpler. It does the same thing as if null, except it always just returns 0 if the value is null. So Zn null returns a 0. So since I put a null in the Zn expression, I get a 0. If I put in a value like 1, then I would return the value 1 for every row in my data set. So like if I click here and I do full data, you will see Zn just always gives me 1 for every single row in the data. So that is it for logical expressions. You can obviously combine them to do very complex things, but I'm just going through the basics of how you could set up this syntax for those. And so now I'd like to close this video with a quote from Tufte. Tufte says, "Graphical excellence is that which gives to the viewer the greatest number of ideas in the shortest time with the least ink in the smallest space."